one of Shedeur Sanders' loudest critics, just did the unthinkable. He folded. Cris Carter, a Hall of Famer, a respected analyst, and one of the most vocal voices questioning Shedeur Sanders, has officially apologized. Not quietly, not indirectly, publicly. And that alone tells you how fast the narrative around Shedeur has flipped. Because this isn't just about one analyst changing his mind. It's about power shifting. For months, Carter hammered Shedeur's game, questioned his talent, attacked his mentality, even dragged Deion Sanders into the conversation, claiming his father ruined his development. He projected Shedeur as a late-round gamble, not a franchise quarterback. Now, he's calling him QB1. He's saying the Browns should commit fully to him. He's even suggesting Cleveland move on from other quarterbacks immediately. That's not a small adjustment. That's a complete surrender. And it didn't happen in isolation. This apology came right after the Browns publicly signaled their long-term commitment to Shedeur Sanders for the 2026 season. The timing isn't accidental. Once organizations make their choice, the media has to adjust or risk being left behind. But here's the part that makes this situation explosive. Carter isn't the only one flipping. Rex Ryan reversed his stance. Tony Grossi changed his tone. Mary Kay Cabot softened her coverage. One by one, critics who spent months doubting Shedeur are suddenly rewriting their narratives. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Did these analysts actually change their minds? Or are they protecting their credibility now that Shedeur is proving them wrong on the field? Because when performance meets opportunity, excuses disappear. Shedeur didn't argue back. He didn't go on social media rants. He didn't beg for respect. He let the tape speak. And now the same voices that tried to bury his draft stock are lining up to praise his potential. This isn't just redemption. It's exposure. And once you see what Cris Carter said before, and why this apology happened now, you'll realize this story isn't about forgiveness. It's about who controls the narrative when the truth finally shows up. Cris Carter didn't just tweak his opinion. He completely reversed course. After the Browns signaled that Shedeur Sanders is their quarterback moving forward, Carter came out with statements nobody expected to hear. The same man who once questioned Shedeur's ceiling is now openly calling him the future of the franchise. Even more shocking, Carter went a step further and suggested Cleveland should trade away Dillon Gabriel immediately, saying there's no point keeping him if Shedeur is the guy. Think about that shift. From this kid shouldn't be drafted high, to build the entire offense around him. That's not growth, that's surrender. And the way Carter framed it made it even more telling. He didn't hedge. He didn't soften the landing. He flat out admitted he was wrong. He said he misjudged Shedeur's talent, misread his development, miscalculated his ability to adapt to the NFL game. When a Hall of Famer analyst does that publicly, it sends a message across the entire sports media ecosystem. It tells other commentators one thing: the old narrative is dead. Because once the Browns made their stance clear, the room shifted. Analysts who were comfortable criticizing Shedeur from a distance suddenly had to confront reality. The organization made a choice. The tape backed it up, and Carter knew staying on the wrong side of that decision would damage his credibility. So he pivoted. Vast. But here, what makes this moment even crazier. This wasn't casual criticism that he was walking back. Carter had gone hard on Shedeur for months. He didn't just question throws or footwork. He attacked the entire foundation of Shedeur's career. Which makes this apology even louder. Because to understand how dramatic this flip really is, you have to remember what Carter originally said about Shedeur Sanders. And once you hear that again, this reversal hits completely different. Before this apology ever happened, Cris Carter wasn't just skeptical. He was brutal. Carter openly questioned Shedeur's work ethic. He criticized his leadership. He even went after Deion Sanders, claiming that Shedeur had been coddled and protected too much to survive real NFL pressure. According to Carter, Shedeur hadn't faced enough adversity to be ready for the next level. And then came the draft talk. Carter didn't see Shedeur as a top-tier prospect. He didn't even see him as a safe early pick. He publicly suggested Shedeur should be taken in the 5th round. 5th round. That's developmental backup territory. That's maybe he works out status. Not franchise quarterback. Not long-term starter. Not face of the team potential. He also attacked Shedeur's physical profile. Said the arm strength wasn't elite. Questioned the measurables. Suggested he wasn't athletic enough to consistently beat NFL defenses. He framed Shedeur as a system product, someone boosted by college schemes and hype instead of raw ability. But what made the criticism sting the most wasn't the football analysis. It was how personal it got. Carter didn't just talk about throws and mechanics. He went after character, mental toughness, preparation habits, even implied that Shedeur's confidence was entitlement instead of earned belief. That narrative stuck. It spread across sports media. It influenced fan opinion. It became part of the story surrounding Shedeur's transition to the league. Which is why this apology now feels so dramatic. Because the same man who once painted Shedeur as overrated, spoiled, and unprepared is suddenly praising his growth, leadership, and quarterback IQ. That's not a small correction. That's a complete rewrite. And here's the wild part. Cris Carter wasn't even the worst one. Others went even harder. Once Cris Carter flipped, it opened the floodgates. Because he wasn't the first. Rex Ryan had already backtracked. Remember when Rex went after Shedeur, calling him spoiled, questioning his discipline, and publicly clowning his sideline behavior? That same Rex Ryan later reversed course, admitting he misjudged Shedeur and praising his maturity and football intelligence. Then there's Tony Grossi. For months, Grossi consistently pushed negative reports out of Brown's camp, questioned Shedeur's practice performance, highlighted mistakes while ignoring progress, even went as far as downplaying injuries and suggesting softness. But once the gap between Shedeur and other quarterbacks became obvious, Grossi had no choice but to adjust his tone. Suddenly, he was talking about Shedeur as Cleveland's future. And Mary Kay Cabot followed the same pattern. Early skepticism, constant questioning, then quiet shifts in language once Shedeur kept stacking strong performances. The more he proved himself, the harder it became to maintain the old narrative. This isn't coincidence. It's a domino effect. When one major voice flips publicly, others feel pressure to follow. Nobody wants to be the last person clinging to a take that's collapsing in real time. And that raises an important question. Why now? Why are all these reversals happening at the same moment? Because it's not just about improved play. There's something else forcing this shift. Something bigger than opinions. This wave of apologies didn't happen because analysts suddenly became nicer. It happened because Shedeur Sanders made denial impossible. Once the Browns publicly committed to him as their quarterback moving forward, the conversation changed overnight. That announcement wasn't just about depth charts. It was a declaration of trust, a signal that the organization saw him as more than a temporary option. And when franchises make that kind of move, media narratives have to adjust fast. But it wasn't only the front office decision. The tape backed it up. Shedeur started stacking strong performances, better pocket control, faster reads, improved decision-making, more command of the offense. The mistakes that critics love to highlight became harder to find, and the plays that actually win games started showing up consistently. That's when the excuses ran out. When on-field production aligns with organizational confidence, there's nowhere left to hide. Analysts can debate opinions, but they can't argue with results that show up every week. And here's another factor most people ignore. Once a player becomes the future face of a franchise, criticizing them aggressively becomes risky. Media personalities don't just analyze football. They protect access, relationships, relevance. Being publicly wrong about a rising star damages credibility and future opportunities. So the smart move: get ahead of the story. Admit the mistake. Reposition early. That's exactly what we're watching happen right now. But there's still one layer deeper. Because this isn't just about football performance. It's about reputation survival. And that's where this story gets even more interesting. Let's be real. These apologies aren't just about honesty. They're about survival. In sports media, being wrong once isn't fatal. Being wrong repeatedly on a player who's clearly ascending is career damage. Analysts build brands on being right early. When that reputation cracks, audiences stop trusting takes. Engagement drops, credibility fades. And Shedeur Sanders became the worst possible person to be wrong about. Because he isn't just winning games, he's becoming the face of a franchise. Every good performance compounds the mistake of those who doubted him publicly. Every highlight clip becomes a receipt. So what's the safest move? Flip early. Control the narrative before it controls you. That's why you're seeing the tone shift so fast. Critics aren't slowly adjusting. They're sprinting away from old takes. They're reframing their criticism as tough love. They're calling it growth. They're saying, "I misjudged him," before fans can say it for them. It's reputation management in real time. And the irony is brutal. The same voices that once questioned Shedeur's maturity are now scrambling to protect their own. But while analysts were pivoting, Shedeur Sanders was doing something completely different. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't clapping back. He wasn't chasing validation. He stayed silent. And that silence is what made this reversal even louder. While critics were flooding timelines with hot takes and walkbacks, Shedeur Sanders stayed quiet. No subtweets. No victory laps. No public callouts. And that might be the most dangerous move he could have made in the best way possible. Because silence forces the spotlight onto performance. Instead of fueling drama, Shedeur let the scoreboard speak. He showed up to practice locked in. He showed up on game days prepared. And every rep, every drive, every clean pocket read quietly erased another old narrative. That's rare. Most young quarterbacks feel pressure to respond, to defend themselves, to prove something verbally. Shedeur didn't. He understood something deeper. If you talk while rising, people argue. If you rise while staying silent, people surrender. That's exactly what happened. Critics weren't responding to tweets. They were responding to reality. They weren't reacting to statements. They were reacting to results. And that's why the apology tour feels different this time. It doesn't feel forced by drama. It feels forced by inevitability. But here's the twist most people haven't thought about yet. This situation isn't just reshaping Shedeur's image. It's reshaping how young quarterbacks are evaluated moving forward. And that shift could change the league. What's happening with Shedeur Sanders isn't staying in Cleveland. It's already changing how the entire league looks at young quarterbacks. For years, teams followed the same script: physical measurables first, arm strength over accuracy, prototype builds over actual production. If you didn't fit the mold, you were labeled a project or a backup before you even touched the field. Shedeur just cracked that formula. He proved that processing speed, composure, leadership, and decision-making can outweigh raw traits. He showed that preparation beats hype. And most importantly, He showed that winning the locker room matters just as much as winning scouting debates. Front offices are watching this closely. Because if a quarterback who was once mocked as a fifth-round talent can rise this fast, it forces teams to rethink evaluation models. It forces coaches to re-examine how they develop young passers. And it forces scouts to admit that some of their old metrics simply don't translate to real-world success. And the effect doesn't stop there. College quarterbacks coming into the league now have proof that narrative isn't permanent. That early criticism doesn't define careers. That production and growth can flip perception faster than any draft ranking ever could. Shedeur didn't just win a starting job. He challenged the system. And when one player exposes cracks in the process, others benefit. But this story still isn't finished. Because the biggest test hasn't even arrived yet. And what happens next could either cement this rise or make the pressure explode. This isn't just about Cris Carter apologizing. This isn't about Rex Ryan switching sides. This isn't even about Cleveland nomming Shedeur Sanders QB1. This is about a power shift. For years, media voices controlled the narrative. Analysts decided who was NFL ready and who wasn't. Draft boards shaped reputations before players ever touched the field. Once you were labeled, escaping that box was almost impossible. Shedeur just broke that cycle. He didn't beg for approval. He didn't adjust his image to fit old-school expectations. He didn't soften his confidence. He stayed locked in, trusted his preparation, and let performance force the conversation to change. And it worked. Now the same people who questioned his character are praising his leadership. The same voices that mocked his upside are calling him a franchise quarterback. The same critics who wanted him buried on depth charts are watching him become the centerpiece of an organization. That doesn't happen often. And when it does, it sends a message to the entire league. Players are starting to control their own narratives. Performance is outweighing opinion. Tape is beating talk shows. Results are silencing speculation. But here's the real pressure point. Now that Shedeur has the job, now that expectations are sky high, now that the spotlight is permanent, there's no hiding. Every snap matters. Every decision is magnified. Every win builds the legend. Every mistake gets amplified. That's the price of becoming the face of a franchise. And so far, Shedeur hasn't flinched. He didn't fold under criticism. He didn't crack under doubt.